what's my story? What's my plan?
Mm.
How do I tell that story rather than just saying Tulane, environmental science, and confirming what they already know, right? What they want through this interview is just to get you talking.
What are the common F1 visa questions?
I know everybody wants to know what are the common F1 visa questions, and I'll tell you some of them that you definitely can expect. But also, I want you to think about this a little bit differently. I don't want you to think, okay, what are the questions I'm going to be asked, and then prepare answers to those specific questions. Because in most cases, they're going to ask you a question that you didn't prepare for. Or they're going to ask you one question and it leads to more questions about the same thing, right? So if you just prepare memorized answers never really establish rapport. If you memorize answers, you're going to come off as robotic. What you should do is you should know in general, okay, what's my story? What's my plan? How do I tell that story? And then make sure that when you're answering that visa officer's questions, you're telling him that story so that he or she feels like they know you, feels like they understand what your plan is. Now, what are the questions they're definitely going to ask you? Where are you studying? What are you going to study? Right? These are obviously questions that they can find the answer to just by looking at your I-24. They can look down and they can see, okay, let's see, who do we have? Arizona State. Okay, I see that you're studying at Arizona State, and I see that you're going to study a PhD in Earth and Environmental Science, right? But why do they ask you that question anyway? Well, they have to start somewhere, right? What they want through this interview is just to get you talking so that they can understand who you are, what you plan to do, and they can decide, do I trust that you actually intend to do what you say you're going to do? So they ask that question. What you can use that for, you can use that opportunity not to just say Tulane, environmental science. No, use that opportunity to tell your story, to introduce yourself, right? To give a brief summary of your resume. Well, I'm going to Tulane to study environmental science because I already got my bachelor's degree in environmental science here in my home country. And I've worked for a few years, but now I want to take it to the next level. So I've been accepted into Tulane. I got a partial scholarship. So that's going to pay for half of it. And then my parents, because they've been very successful, I'm very fortunate my parents can cover the rest of the expenses. All of a sudden, you've given them a whole vision of a legitimate student in response to their question, rather than just saying Tulane, environmental science, and confirming what they already know.
Definitely. And I love how you talked about, and interacting with you guys before with visa interviews. It's not a test, it's a conversation. It's not about spitting out the right fact or answer. It's about clear communication, and it's more about telling your story and telling a story that makes sense. And
Absolutely.
so obviously you can prepare for some of these common questions about funding, admit, future plans, things like that. But I think another tricky thing is, can you tell your story in a way that makes sense? The basic 3-part story is, where have you been? What are you doing now? And where are you going? And I think if you can do that well, then the visa officer is going to, have a better understanding and feel good about your situation.